Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is episode 39 of our series Muhammad, the man who changed the world. We were talking about the letters the Prophet ﷺ wrote to the various rulers of the region. We spoke about the letter to the king of Abyssinia, the patriarch or the bishop of Egypt, the letter to Bahrain. The Prophet also wrote to the king of Oman, and then we spoke about the letter to Heracles, the emperor of Rome. The other major power in the world were the Persians, or the Sassanids as they were called. And the Sassanid Empire is even older than the Roman Empire. It's more ancient, and it's ruled. The kingdom of the Sassanids was from modern day Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, and then further north into Armenia, Azerbaijan. These areas were all under Persian control, and there was a bitter rivalry between the Romans and the Persians. Even in the Quran, Allah mentions "Ghulibat Rum," the surah chapter Romans. It begins by saying the Romans have been defeated. Now, who's defeating the Romans? Who is able to defeat the Romans? Of course, it's the Persians. And the Persians were a people who followed a religion called Zoroastrianism, which had evolved and changed to believe in a lord, and they symbolized fire, and they would worship fire as the lord of light. So Khusru, that's his name, the emperor of Persia, Khusru the second, or Khusro, his name was Aparvez. Khusro being the titles like Caesar, Kaiser, Khusru. All these have a similar sounding thing. It means a similar thing. The ruler or the king, and he was known as the Shah, the king of kings. So he was the ruler of the Persian Empire, and up until this point, perhaps he was even more powerful and more respected than Heracles. In fact, Khusro was able to conquer all of the Roman territories when eventually Heracles was able to manage to fight back. And as the Quran mentions, Ghulibat Rum, that the Romans were defeated. Khusro was the one that defeated the Romans. And then Heracles, Allah says that the Romans will come back after this defeat. And it was in fact Heracles who recaptured and conquered the Middle Eastern territories. So the Prophet ﷺ writes a letter to Khusru, and the emperor of Persia, when he receives this letter, his reaction is he is completely offended and disgusted. Like, how dare, these Arabs, who in their mind was not even human, who were barbarians, who were backwards, how dare he invites me to his religion, the goal for me to submit to his religion and to his God and to his teachings. And he was so angry that he, in front of the Sahabi, the one who delivered the letter, he tore up the letter and he threw it, and he was completely disrespected. And he then sends a commandment. Khusru sends a commandment to the ruler of Yemen. Now, Yemen was a colony of, you could say, colony of Persia, and the governor of Yemen his name was Badan. He was that's the name of the. So you have Khusru, the emperor of Persia. He's got a governor of Yemen called Badan, and Khusru says to Badan, "You go and capture this Muhammad and bring him to me. This guy who dares write a letter to me, I want you to go and send soldiers, capture him, and bring him to me." So when the Sahabi comes back to Medina, he informs the Prophet ﷺ that, Khusru tore up the letter, and the Prophet says, as he had torn up my letter, his kingdom would be destroyed. That his entire kingdom will be destroyed as he tore up my letter. Now, it's interesting that Heracles asked, or the Tanuhi, the man who was sent to the Nabi Sallam, tell the Prophet specifically that I honored his letter. And you saw the same thing with the the bishop of Egypt. They want the Nabi to know that while we don't accept your religion, we dealt with the letter very, very respectfully. And there is something here around the way you treat a letter from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from the messenger of Allah. If you disrespect it, there's a special kind of adab. So the Prophet says that, look, both the ruler of Egypt and Heracles respected my letter. They will be saved, but they will lose their kingdoms. As for Khusru, he disrespected my letter, and basically he will now have to deal with the consequences, and his whole kingdom will be torn up. And again, subhanallah, exactly as the Prophet had said. Within 5 6 years from this point, Khalid bin Walid and the Sahaba would invade Persia, and the entire dynasty, the Persian Empire, which stood for more than 1,000 years, would completely dissolve and disappear. SubhanAllah, can you imagine that in the time of the Nabi Sallam, the Persians have been around for more than 1,000 years. They were, you could not imagine a world without them. 20 years later, there would not be a Persian Empire. Not even 20 years, 10 years later, there would not be a Persian Empire. It would not exist. It would be like the way we now can't even imagine of a Soviet Union. It's gone, it just disappeared, doesn't exist anymore. That's how quickly the Persian Empire would disappear. And so the Prophet prophesizes his kingdom will disappear and will vanish very soon. And then remember, the emperor requested the governor of Yemen, Badan, go and fetch the Prophet ﷺ. And so Badan sends two men or two assassins or whatever to go and capture the Prophet ﷺ. And these two guys from Yemen arrive in Medina, and they realize there's no way they're going to take the Prophet ﷺ alive. And when the Prophet ﷺ meets these two men, he says to them, go back to Yemen and inform your Rabb. The Prophet is saying, you two guys, your Lord is the governor of Yemen. You tell your Rabb, you tell your Lord that my Lord, Allah, my Lord, has killed his Lord. This is play on words here. The Prophet is saying to these two soldiers, go back to your Lord, the governor of Yemen. Go back to the governor of Yemen and tell the governor of Yemen that the Lord of Muhammad, meaning Allah, has killed his Lord. And who's the Lord of the the Yemeni governor's Lord is, of course, the Emperor of Persia. Go and tell him that his Lord has been killed by my Lord. And so, these two guys were like, this riddle, what does this riddle even mean? They go back to Yemen and they inform Badan, look, this is what Muhammad has says. And within a day, the news reaches that Khusru the Great, Khusru the Emperor of Persia, has been assassinated by his own son. Khusru, his own son, tortured his father and killed him and cut him into pieces, literally, tortured him to death and took over the kingdom. And with that, the entire Persian government goes into civil war. And this will also be Qadr Allah Masha. It's really, when you look at history and you look at where the Muslims were and where they're going to be in the next few years, there's no way of explaining this rationally. How these things fall into place as the Prophet had predicted, but just in itself, how these things materialize that you could not imagine. And so, literally, we could say days after destroying the letter of the Prophet, Khusru is assassinated. And of course, now we have not just Islamic sources, we now have we have the sources from the Romans, and because that's the news of the time. So if you were to search on Khusru, we will know that he was killed by his own son, and his kingdom gets thrown into a civil war, and the civil war will continue for 5 6 years, killing one ruler. I think they had like 13 emperors within a few years. Eventually, a woman, a lady is appointed as emperor, and the Prophet ﷺ basically says this is the end of the Persian Empire. And of course, within the time of the Sahaba, they would take over and conquer all this land, and there will be no more Persian Empire as is. And so this is the letter of the Prophet ﷺ to the various rulers of the time, and we'll pick up more of that inshallah if you were to study beyond the Seerah. Now, the one area that was still very much on back to the local front, the one area that was still hostile to the Muslims was, of course, the city of Khaybar. The city of Khaybar, which was a Jewish city, and they were, of course, the people who had financed and assisted the Battle of Ahzab. So they were part of the coalition, and under any terms, any kind of terms of engagement, if you have sent your army to invade my country, and now, you know what, I'm in a strong position, and you haven't made amends for it, you haven't offered peace terms for it, well, you are par for the course. And so with Mecca being pacified, with the Prophet ﷺ, sending his message beyond Arabia, with his position becoming stronger, within a few months after Hudaybiyah, in fact, it looks like 2-3 months after Hudaybiyah, almost immediately, this also the same people who at Hudaybiyah, only them were allowed to join on the campaign, the 200-kilometer journey outside Medina, and they basically, preemptively attack was preemptively. Khaybar actually attacked first, but in a manner which was a surprise to the people of Khaybar, how quickly the Prophet could mobilize a force. An army arrives at Khaybar, and the Muslims arrived in the morning. The city was taken completely off guard, and the people rushed back into their fortresses. Now, what made Khaybar different to any other city basically in Arabia was that it was a built up city. And it was a city that was Jewish completely. It didn't have an Arab tribe. It was also a highly cultivated city. So what you found, Khaybar was a unique city in that it had a very sophisticated agricultural system, and it had a number of like mini tribes, and each one had their own little fort. And these were all, we could imagine maybe little apartment complexes, and each family or extended family stayed in one of these things. And there were like, more than a dozen of these little fortifications. And so when the Muslims arrived, of course, they don't have siege warfare or siege machinery. And so it becomes quite a bit of a different type of battle. It isn't an open battle, but the Muslims would besiege these fortresses, and it was difficult to conquer these fortresses. It was difficult to get inside. And after a number of days of trying, the Muslims also were running out of supplies. The Prophet, peace be upon him, says, tomorrow, so this was the day they're fighting, trying to get in, they're not able to get in. They retire for the evening, the Muslims retire for the evening, and they make Isha'i Salah, and the Prophet says, tomorrow, I will give the flag, or the flag meaning the command, to a man who Allah and the Rasul loves, a man that Allah loves, and the man the Rasul of Allah loves, and through him Allah will grant victory. And Umar says, I never wanted leadership more than that. The next day, all of us wanted to be that man. Umar says, I never desired being the leader more than that day. And when Fajr time came, they made Salah. The Prophet looks around and he says, where's Ali? Where's Ali? Ali bin Abi Talib. And they said, no, Ya Rasulullah, Ali is sick at home. He has an eye infection. So he had, like what we could say, maybe pink eye or something, where he couldn't see at all. His eyes were all puffy and pussy. He couldn't even, walk to the Salah place. And so the Prophet said, no, call him, bring him here. And so Ali is brought to the Nabi Sallam. He's basically unable to see. And the Prophet Sallam puts saliva, the Prophet's own saliva, in his eyes, and Ali radiallahu anh becomes cured instantly. And then the Prophet says, yeah, Ali, take the flag and go and don't come back. Go and fight and don't come back. And so Ali takes it and he marches forward, and on his way he realizes he wanted to ask a question, but I was commanded not to come back. It's a very famous incident where Ali is walking and then he stops, but he doesn't, because he was commanded, don't come back, don't turn back. And so Ali stands and he shouts, Ya Rasulullah, what am I supposed to tell them? He was so excited to go. I don't even know what are the terms that you give me, because the general needs to offer the party that you're fighting with terms and conditions. So he said, what are the terms and conditions? And so the Prophet says to them, oh Ali, tell them, invite them to Islam. Invite them to Islam, and if they accept Islam, then their lives, their property, their life is spared, and they are our brothers, and we have nothing, we will not basically have anything against them. So this tells you the justification. Jihad is not conquest of property, it is not conquest of money, it is to spread Islam. And also, you cannot force Islam on people, so you invite them to Islam. If they accept, then khalas, they are ikhwan fi din, they become our brothers, they're part of the ummah, everything is maintained, their positions are maintained, their status is maintained. If they reject, then of course they are offered to surrender, and if they surrender, then of course there's something called the jizya, which is a tax that you pay if you surrender, and if not, you fight, then we fight and you are at our mercy once you are defeated. So Ali radiallahu anh goes, and the Prophet also mentions here that if one person is guided to Islam, it's better for you than any kind of money in the world, that we're not here for conquest of money. And so Sayyidina Ali goes and he leads the charge, and there are a number of skirmishes here where Ali radiallahu anh is the commander, and it's through the hands of Ali, through the grace of Allah, that Khaybar is conquered. And once again, all the Sahaba play immense roles during the Seerah. Yes, the day of Khaybar is the day for Sayyidina Ali. And when Khaybar was conquered, what do we do now? They were conquered. Remember what happened to the Banu Qurayza. And they were offered, so this group of people who had, many of them were from Medina, they had betrayed Islam 3 times. They sent an army against Medina. what should be done with these people now, and what is the level of punishment that must be dealt out to them, having caused so much harm to Islam. The terms were, guys, just, O people of Khaybar, pack up your stuff and you may leave, relocate to another land out of our vicinity. And the people of Khaybar respond back and say to, O Muhammad, that look, this land of ours is an agricultural land. You people don't know how to. Even if you conquer the city and you take over the city, and we take our wealth and we go and you take over the city, you don't know how to do what we are doing in terms of agriculture. So how about we remain and we will pay a type of a tax and you leave us and give us protection. And the Prophet ﷺ agrees that this is a good idea. And so the people of Khaybar remained, their property, their lives were not harmed. They were not allowed to have an army, so their weapons were confiscated, and some of the fortresses were sort of made damaged in a way that it could easily be taken over if they were to revolt. And their wealth, the tax, would be paid to Medina. And the Prophet ﷺ, of the annual tax, he said, keep half of it as an emergency supply in case there's an emergency, and the rest would come to Medina. And the Sahaba would say, only after Khaybar were we able to eat a proper meal a day. So the entire Seerah, the Sahaba were always on the verge of malnutrition. The Arabs, by and large, living in the desert, you can imagine living in the desert, there just isn't one meal a day. Literally, having one meal a day was considered wealthy in their time. That if you ate a meal a day, then you were well off. Most people went a day or two without knowing what to eat. They said only when Khaybar was conquered and it was sending its annual, not all of it, a percentage, some mention about 50% at most, was sent to Medina. The people of Medina could now eat properly, could have a meal a day. Also, a few things that happened after the conquest of Khaybar. The Nabi Sallam was presented with a plate of food, and it was a nice thing. It was like a slaughtered a sheep. So meat was very rare. You didn't really get to eat meat much, and so they didn't have rice. And we imagine this, kapsa kind of thing, but rice has not yet come to the Arab lands. Rice is still to be discovered by the Muslims, and so it will be meat with some vegetables and bread, maybe flour. And so this was brought to the Nabi Sallam, and he invited a number of Sahaba to eat with him, and he took a bite and immediately he spat it out and he said to the Sahaba, stop eating, because the meat has been poisoned. So the Prophet, peace be upon him, says that he has been informed the meat was poisoned, and even though he swallowed a small morsel, he spat out the rest. And then the Prophet called the people who had brought the food, and he said to them, I'm going to ask you to tell the truth or not. Tell me the truth and be honest with me. Did you, poison the meat? And they confessed, yes, they did. They poisoned the lamb. And he asked, why would you do this? Why did you do this? And so they said that we wanted to test if you were really a Nabi or if you were a king. If you were a king, you would have eaten and you would have died, and that's it, got rid of a liar. But if you really were a prophet, then indeed Allah would have protected you. So now the Prophet said, fine, this is, you did this, go, and he actually set them free. He took the excuse, not that they embraced Islam, but he took the excuse. They said, oh, we just wanted to test if you were Nabi. Fine, go, get lost. And he pardoned them. But one of the companions who ate fell ill and died. And so the Prophet called them back and said, who made the food? Who is responsible for making the food? And it was a lady. And so she was, initially, as we said, she was let free. But then because she had killed somebody, qisas had to be applied on her, that she was executed for murdering the Sahabi. Another interesting event after Khaybar is that Safiya was taken prisoner of war. Now, who is Safiya? Safiya was the daughter of Huyay. Who was Huyay? Huyay was the king or the leader of Banu Nadir. Remember, we spoke about Banu Nadir, the tribe that was expelled. He tried to assassinate the Nabi Sallam, and then he comes to Khaybar. Khaybar is where he goes to. And from Khaybar, he orchestrates the battle of the trench. So this is Huyay, this is his daughter. Huyay, what happened to him? Remember, he was at the battle of Ahzab, or the battle of the trench, and when Abu Sufyan got so angry, he fled Abu Sufyan and he went into Medina to hide with the Banu Qurayza. And so when the Banu Qurayza were basically punished, he was with them. And so Huyay, I mean, how did he die? I don't think we mentioned it, that when Huyay was finally brought out, the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, like, finally now, would you not accept that, you were wrong? That Allah has disgraced you again and again and again. He disgraced you with the Banu Nadir. He disgraced you here. And would you not like accept? I mean, you're a learned man. You are like a semi-rabbi. You see all the truth. You know Allah and the scripture. Will you not like to the bitter end accept Islam now? And he says, never. Over my dead body will I accept Islam. And of course, I don't care even if I go to hell. I'll rather go to hell than accept you as a prophet. And his clothes was torn. And he said, and I've torn my clothes because I will not allow any of you to take my clothing. And subhanAllah, this is how, and he was obviously executed. And so to the bitter end, Huyay refused to even acknowledge, even though he knew the truth, but he was not going, his arrogance would not allow it. Now, Safiya is his daughter, and she was captured as one of the prisoners of war at at uh, at the conquest of Khaybar. Her husband was killed in. So there, of course, was some fighting. Him being a prominent man, he fought and he was killed. It mentions he was a treasurer and he was also trying to smuggle money away, and so he was executed. So Sophia was taken as a prisoner of war, and she was to be ransomed, as we spoke in the last episode, that she was to be ransomed off, or kept as a slave. And someone mentioned the Prophet ﷺ that is Sophia. She is the mistress of the Banu Nadir. She is the chief's daughter. She's a prominent lady. So the Prophet said, "Call her, bring her here, bring her here." And the Prophet ﷺ began to speak with her. Now, you know what, subhanAllah, it's amazing how the Prophet, peace be upon him, was awkward in front of her. He felt a level of awkwardness in front of her. Why? Because she lost her husband. Her father was killed at the Battle of the Trench, along with her brother and other relatives. And so the Prophet sits with her and he says that you must like really hate me. You must really have such a horrible opinion of me because your father, your brother, your husband, all of them, I'm responsible for their death. And he began to, and this is Safiya. Safiya is telling us that this is the first time she meets him. And the Prophet ﷺ began by being apologetic to her. Now one might say, who cares? She's like a slave woman, she's been captured. Why even care what she thinks? But he's being compassionate and he's saying to her, he's trying to explain why things turned out they did. And he said that your father brought all of the Arabs against me. Your father started this war. Your father did everything against me. And ultimately he refused. And so he eventually, they paid with their life. He forced my hand. And Safiya said, he spoke to me and made, explained himself to the point where she actually understood where he was coming from. So she then mentioned something interesting to him. And we spoke about this hadith. She says, I remember the day you came to Medina. So remember, Safiya used to be in Medina. She was with the Banu Nadir. When the Prophet arrived in Medina, she also would have known, there's a Nabi, a guy claiming to be Prophet in Medina. She would have also been expelled with the Banu Nadir. And so she tells the Prophet, I remember the day you came to Medina, and I remember the meeting my father and my uncle, the rabbi, had with you. And I remember that my father and my uncle were discussing, and my father asked my uncle, is this man really a prophet? Is he really a Nabi? And the rabbi said, yes, he is a Nabi. We need to follow him. And my father said, I will never follow him until the day I die. So she's telling the Nabi, I remember that my uncle confessed that you were a prophet. So Safiya is telling us the Messenger of Allah used to be the most hateful person to me. I used to hate him because he killed my father and he killed my brother and he killed my husband. Yet he never ceased to give me justification and apologies. That he was explaining himself and going to great lengths and saying, I'm sorry for what befell you. And in all of that, I was saying, I really feel sorry for you. I didn't mean to hurt you. And then he says, but your father incited the Arabs against me, and he did such a thing until feeling, he came to his end. And she said, finally, this anger dissipated from her heart. Then it's also mentioned that Safiya had a bruise on her cheek, and he said, who did this to you? He wanted to know if some of the Sahaba hit you, or did one of the companions do this? Why is your face bruised up, bashed up? So she said, no, my husband did this. Your husband did this. Why would your husband have done this? His father's husband said. So she said, no, before you came to invade us, like a day or two before, I had a strange dream where I dreamt that the moon is falling into my lap. And I told my husband, I have this strange dream. And her husband said, you are dreaming about the king of the Arabs, and you are in love with him. You desire the king of the Arabs. And he hit me that you want to be married to the king of the Arabs. And so she narrated this thing to the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ then says to her, Sophia, I offer you the option. If you were to remain on Judaism, then I will set you free without a ransom and I will return you to your family. If you wish to remain a Jew, then I will make sure that your ransom is paid personally, I'll pay it for you, and you go back to your family. But if you desire Islam and you embrace Islam, then I will marry you. Then I will marry you. And so she says that, oh Allah's Messenger, indeed Allah says in His book that that I. So she says that I select you. And I wish to be a Muslim, and so the Prophet, oh Messenger of Allah, indeed I longed for Islam, and I testify to you, I was inclined towards Islam and inclined to you even before you came here. I already felt a connection with Islam, and so I wish to embrace Islam. And so she embraced Islam, and the Prophet ﷺ marries her. And initially the Sahaba were extremely apprehensive. When the Sahaba heard that the Prophet ﷺ is marrying Safiya, they thought to themselves, clearly this cannot be normal. This lady is an assassin. She's looking for an opportunity to get close to you. She wants to hurt you. They tried to kill you just now. They tried to poison you. There's no way this lady would marry you after everything. And so there's a sort of a cute narration that, after on their way back to Medina, they got married. And of course, being husband and wife, they had a tent and they spent their honeymoon night. And when the Prophet ﷺ, woke up the next morning, he found a Sahabi outside his tent. And he said, what are you doing here? And so he said, no, Ya Rasulullah, I was just, so concerned for your safety that I positioned myself outside. If anything were to happen, I would come in. And he said, no, nothing happened. We were as husband and wife. We were, intimate with the other, and that's it. And so we are both very happy. And so the Prophet ﷺ was Sophia was pleased with him, and he was pleased with her. And so Sophia now joins the mothers of the believers. And so if we were to list the wives of the Nabi Sallam up to this point, we had, just go with me quickly, and we should know their names. We have Khadija. Prophet ﷺ married her and she passed away. He was over 50 by the time she passed away. Then he married our mother Sauda. She was older than him. They spent a few years together. Then the Prophet ﷺ married our mother Aisha. He then, after after the battle of Uhud, a number of ladies lost their husbands, and so a few widows who lost their husbands get married. Firstly, Zainab bin Huzaymah, and then she passes away. So Khadija and Zainab passes away in his lifetime. Then the Prophet ﷺ married Hafsa, the daughter of Sayyidina Umar, and he married Salama, whose husband also passed away. The Prophet ﷺ then married Juwayriya. Remember the Banu Mustalik, when he invaded the Banu Mustalik, and through their marriage the entire tribe was set free. The Prophet ﷺ also married Abu Sufyan's daughter, Habiba, but she was in Abyssinia. She has not yet arrived. She's going to arrive soon. And so Habiba and the Prophet are married, but they are separated. One in Abyssinia, one in Medina. And now the Prophet ﷺ marries, and he married Zainab, of course, Zainab bint Jahsh, which we spoke about, the ex-wife of Zayd. And now he married Safiya. Safiya, only two more to go. And so the Prophet ﷺ married Safiya, the daughter of Huyay. She was originally Jewish, and then she embraces Islam. And what do we know about her? So Aisha tells us that Safiya was incredibly petite and small, very, very delicate. She was very different to the other wives. The other wives were Arabs. They were more accustomed to a rough lifestyle, whereas Safiya was very delicate and very sensitive and very quick to very girly. And so she would cry a lot. You'd find every time Safiya is in the story, she's crying. So Safiya goes to tears very quickly, very, very soft, delicate woman. And you have this narration where she found it quite difficult to integrate with, of course, she's not only marrying the Nabi Sallam, she's now joining a new religion, a new community. This was difficult for her. And she comes to Nabi Sallam crying, and the Prophet said, why, Safiya, why are you crying? So she says, your other wives, and they say, I'm just a Jewish girl. Whenever they said, what are you saying, you Jewish girl? They use this as an insult, and they are belittling her lineage. And so the Prophet said, whenever they say this to you again, tell them, why would you belittle me when my great great grandfather was Harun, and my great great grand uncle was Musa, and my husband is Muhammad, all prophets of Allah. That of all of them, if anybody should belittle the other, she is the one with a higher lineage than them. We also have this very beautiful narration where we know the Prophet ﷺ, many of us would probably know this hadith, that he's in the masjid performing itikaf, and he is visited by one of his wives. She spends some time with him in itikaf, in the masjid, whatever. And then when time was up, he broke his itikaf and he took her home and he walked her home. And while he was walking with her home, two companions saw him and then they ran away. So it's the middle of the night, the Prophet is alone in the back of the masjid with this lady, and they see, and then they dash away. And the Prophet said, no, 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 come back, come back, come back. This is my wife Safiya. And they said, Ya Rasulullah, how could we didn't even insinuate anything. They said, no, no, no. Shaitan flows through the blood of man. Shaitan creates perceptions. You maybe thought that this was, why is the Nabi talking late at night with the strange lady? Isn't he supposed to be in itikaf? He said, no, this is my wife Safiya. And so the Prophet ﷺ was taking her home. Now, I can imagine that she was feeling, why would she come visit him? She was lonely. She doesn't have family. She is probably being treated quite harshly from the other wives. She doesn't have many friends. Her only real companion is the Prophet ﷺ, and now he's in itikaf, he's in the masjid, she's not seeing him. And so she missed him. And so she came to visit him, and as a gentleman, he prioritized her needs, and he even broke his itikaf to take her home and spend more time with her. And he, of course, clarified that this is Safiya. We also know that she cooked amazingly. She was like a very good cook. The other wives were quite impressed that she could cook so well. So very much domesticated princess, whatever. And she was short. She was shorter than average. And so, subhanAllah, and what a gentleman the Nabi Sallallahu was. Safiya mentions that when she were to get on a camel or on a horse, because she's short, she can't climb up, the Prophet ﷺ would kneel, like when a guy proposes, he kneels, and then one leg up, and she would put her foot or her knee on his leg, and she would then climb onto the camel. And this is the way Safiya would climb a camel, because she couldn't climb up on herself, and so he would kneel for her. What a gentleman. Many of us, most of us, myself included, do we even open or close the door for our wives? Yeah, the Prophet ﷺ allows her to stand on him. And maybe one last little narration about Safiya, towards the end, when they perform Hajj. So when we get to it, the Prophet ﷺ performs Hajj, and with him, all his wives come with him. And as they are, moving from Mecca to Medina, Safiya, being the delicate, being the soft natured lady, she can't keep up in terms of riding. She's not as a good rider as the rest of them. And so she begins to fall behind the other wives, and so she starts bursting into tears. It's just, that's her reaction. When things go a bit bad, she gets overwhelmed and she starts crying and becoming hysterical, and she bursts into tears. And the Prophet ﷺ, he notices that Safiya is not there. He looks around and he sees she's in the back crying, and so he stops the entire Jama'ah. Just imagine this as an Imam. You're taking the community with you on a bus trip, and your wife is crying because she's whatever, and you say, everybody stop. And then he goes, Safiya, what's wrong? He takes her off the camel because she's short, so he takes her off. And she says, he cupped my face in his hands, like my cheeks in his hands, and he rubs away my tears with his thumbs. And the more he's rubbing away my tears, and the more he's pacifying her, the more she's crying and the more emotional she's getting. And so she says, it's your fault you gave me a very slow camel. So she blames, it's your fault, like any other wife, it's your fault. The car is bad, it's not her. Safiya, you don't know how to ride the camel. So it's your fault, you gave me a bad camel and you didn't look after me. And now she's crying, and he's pacifying her, and she's so hysterical. And the Prophet says, somebody, he asks Zainab, give Safiya a different camel. She's sad, give her your camel, swap camel or something. And Zainab, very cheeky as Zainab is, she says, what? That Jewish lady? I'm not going to give her anything. The Prophet was quite annoyed about Zainab for that. And for a while, he sort of ignored her because of that. And Aisha has to come and mediate. But because Safiya is so sad, the Prophet says, guys, Safiya is a bit not doing too well. Let us stop and camp here for the night. And so he just stops the entire And how many people? 100,000 people. He stops the entire Jama'ah, 100,000 people on its way for Umrah, mid journey. Why? Because his wife was, felt a bit sad, and she was a bit emotional, and he stops for her so she could calm down and recuperate. So, mashallah, this is our mother, our mother Safiya, and we'll continue inshallah after Khaybar what happens inshallah in the next episode. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.